A wrongfully accused hospital aide got into what she thought was a maintenance worker's van after her shift ended. She told him everything: the missing medication log, the job she was about to lose, the nephew who couldn't hear a single word she said. He listened without interrupting. Then he picked up his phone, dialed one number, and said 4 words: "Pull the security footage." By morning, everything had changed. This is my story. My name is Diana, and up until 11 months ago, I was a patient care aide at Riverside Medical Center in Columbus, Ohio. Not a nurse, not a doctor, an aide. The people who turn patients, change linens, fetch ice chips at 2 in the morning, hold hands when family hasn't shown up yet. I had been doing it for 6 years, and I was good at it. I knew which patients liked the blinds cracked open in the morning, which ones needed an extra blanket before they asked, which doctors took their coffee black and got irritable when the supply cart was in the wrong hallway. I knew that building the way I knew my own apartment. My nephew Marcus was 9 years old and had never heard my voice. He was born with severe bilateral sensorineural hearing loss, a phrase his pediatric audiologist used so casually the first time she said it that I had to ask her to repeat it, as if the words themselves might sound different the second time. They didn't. My sister, Renee, had given birth to Marcus 2 weeks early after a difficult labor, and by the time the hearing test came back at 6 weeks, we already knew something wasn't right. Marcus's father had been out of the picture before Marcus could sit up on his own. Renee worked as a school cafeteria supervisor and did everything she could, but cochlear implants, both the surgery and the years of speech therapy that follow, cost more than either of us made in a year combined. So I picked up every extra shift I could. I skipped vacations. I packed lunches I made Sunday nights and ate them in the break room at 11:30 in the morning before anyone else showed up so I could pretend I wasn't embarrassed by my food next to the nurses and their delivery. Orders. I had managed to save just under $4,000 over 14 months. The goal was $6,000. My sister's insurance would cover part of it, but the gap was real and it was ours to fill. I kept a photo of Marcus in my scrubs pocket, one where he's looking directly at the camera with this expression that has always struck me as patient, not sad, just waiting, like he already understood, at 9 years old, that some things take time. The night everything fell apart was a Tuesday in February, cold, the kind that comes in through the gaps around the emergency exit doors and settles into your ankles. My shift ran from 3 in the afternoon until 11:30 at night. I had been helping cover the 4th floor because 2 aides had called out sick, and I was tired in the specific way that lives behind your eyes. At 10:40, my charge nurse, Patricia, flagged me down in the hallway outside room 412. The look on her face was the kind that makes your stomach drop before a single word is spoken. "Carol needs to see you," she said. "Right now." Carol Simmons was the assistant head of patient services. She was 48, efficient, and had never once in my 6 years there said anything to me that wasn't transactional. She ran her department like a spreadsheet and viewed any deviation from procedure as a personal insult. I had never had a formal complaint filed against me. I had never been written up. I had 3 commendations in my personnel file, 1 from a patient's family, 2 from attending physicians. None of that mattered in the next 10 minutes. I knocked on Carol's office door, and she told me to come in. She was sitting behind her desk, and on the desk was an open folder. She did not ask me to sit down. "Do you know what this is?" she asked, turning the folder toward me. It was a controlled medication log for room 408. The patient in that room, an elderly man recovering from hip replacement surgery, had been prescribed a short-term opioid for pain management. The log tracked every dose administered and by whom. Standard protocol required it to be completed and returned to the charge nurse's station within 15 minutes of each administration. The log in front of Carol showed a gap, a full 2-hour window, undocumented. "I didn't administer medication in 408, I said. "That's not part of my role." "No," Carol said, "but you were assigned to that wing, and this log was last seen at the aid station adjacent to that room. At the time that documentation went missing, you were the only aide working that section." I felt the floor shift slightly under me. I didn't touch that log. "Diana." She folded her hands on the desk. "I'm not accusing you of taking medication. What I am saying is that a controlled substance log has gone missing during your shift in your section, and that is a compliance issue we cannot ignore. The pharmacy board takes this seriously. The hospital takes this seriously. So do I said. Which is exactly why I'm telling you, I did not touch that log. She looked at me with the expression of someone who has already decided the outcome and is performing the conversation as a formality. We'll be conducting a full review. In the meantime, you're being placed on administrative suspension, effective tonight. Suspension. The word landed somewhere in my chest and sat there, with pay, for now, pending the investigation. But Diana, I have to be honest with you. If this goes the way I think it will, we may be looking at termination, and depending on what the pharmacy board determines, there could be a formal report filed. I stood very still. I thought about the $4,000. I thought about Marcus in the photo, that patient expression of his. I thought about 6 years of early mornings and late nights, and never once cutting a corner. Carol, I said, have you pulled the hallway cameras? Because I can tell you exactly where I was at every point during that shift. The cameras in that corridor were down for a scheduled system update from 9 to 11. She said it evenly, almost pleasantly. Of course they were. The log will turn up, I said. Perhaps, she said. Go home, Diana. We'll be in touch. I changed out of my scrubs in the locker room alone. My hands were shaking in the way they do when you're trying very hard not to cry in a place where you don't want to cry. I sat on the bench for a while with my coat in my lap, not putting it on. Someone had left a half-empty bag of pretzels on the shelf above the lockers. I stared at it for a long time. I had parked in the employee lot on the far east side of the building, a 10-minute walk in February. When I finally pushed through the side exit door, the cold hit me flat across the face, and I was almost grateful for it because at least it was something to feel other than what I was feeling. The parking lot was mostly empty. The overhead lights on the east side were doing that flickering thing they had been doing for 3 weeks, and nobody had fixed yet. I was halfway to my car when I realized my windshield had a thick coat of ice on it, and I had left my scraper inside my gym bag, which was in the trunk. I popped the trunk, dug through it with numb fingers, and when I straightened up I noticed a white van idling near the maintenance entrance of the building. The side door was partially open and the inside light was on. A man in a dark jacket was sitting in the driver's seat talking on the phone, gesturing with one hand. I recognized the van. Or I thought I did. The hospital's facilities crew drove white vans with the Riverside logo on the side. This one had something on the door, but I was too far away to read it clearly in the bad light. And it was pointed the direction I needed to go to get out of the parking lot without crossing the icy section near the north exit. I walked over. The man in the van had finished his call. He was maybe 50, broad-shouldered, with short gray at his temples and an expression that was simply calm. He wore no hospital badge that I could see, but that wasn't unusual for contractors who came in for evening maintenance. "Are you heading out toward the Broad Street exit?" I asked. He looked at me. "I can be. You need a lift to your car?" "My car's right there," I pointed. "I just need to get past the ice patch. Do you mind if I ride with you?" 30 seconds. I know that's a weird ask. He reached over and unlocked the passenger door. "Get in. It's cold." I climbed in. The van was warm and smelled like coffee and something vaguely chemical, like industrial cleaner, which made sense. There was a legal pad on the dashboard covered in handwritten notes I didn't try to read. "Long night?" he asked, pulling forward slowly. And I don't know what it was. The warmth after the cold, or the smallness of being inside a vehicle after the openness of the parking lot, and just the fact that he asked in a way that made it sound like he actually wanted to know. But something in me released. "I just got suspended," I said, "from a job I've had for 6 years, for something I didn't do." He didn't react with alarm or discomfort. He just drove slowly and said, "That's a hard thing. They're saying I lost a controlled medication log. I didn't lose it. I didn't even touch it. But the cameras were down, and I was the only one in that section. So apparently that's enough to suspend me and potentially report me to the pharmacy board." Who else was in that section? It was a simple question, and it stopped me. The charge nurse passed through. A hospitalist made rounds around 9:15, and there was someone from billing doing late discharge paperwork near the nurse's station. He nodded slowly. He had stopped the van near my car. "My nephew is deaf," I said, and I have no idea why that came out next, except that it was the truest thing I knew how to say in that moment. "He's 9. He needs cochlear implant surgery, and I've been saving up for over a year. If I lose this job, if they file a report, I won't be able to work in healthcare anywhere. And I'll lose the savings I have because I'll need them to live on." I stopped myself. I pressed my fingers against my eyes. "I'm sorry. You're a maintenance worker trying to go home, and I just—" "Don't apologize," he said. He was looking at the steering wheel. "What's your nephew's name?" "Marcus." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and handed me a card. Plain white, simple font, Thomas Greer. A phone number. No title, no company name. "If nothing turns up in the next 24 hours, he said, "call that number." I took the card. I thanked him. I got out, scraped my windshield, and drove home in the dark. My apartment was quiet when I got in. I stood in the kitchen for a while without turning on more than the stove light, eating crackers over the sink because I hadn't eaten since noon and my body had finally remembered that. I looked at the card on the counter. Thomas Greer. I thought, maintenance supervisor, probably. Maybe he knew someone in hospital administration. Maybe he was just being kind. I called Renee that night and told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she said, "You didn't do anything wrong." "I know that." "Then it'll come out that way." "Renee." "Diana." "You didn't do anything wrong." She said it again like she was nailing it into something solid. "Get some sleep." I did not get much sleep. The next morning I drove back to the hospital. Not to work, but because I had left my badge and my personal items in my locker and I needed to clean it out. The suspension protocol required it. I signed in at the security desk and was escorted by a facilities manager named Gary, who I had known for 4 years, who could not make eye contact with me the entire time. In the locker room, while I was emptying out my things, a young aide named Simone, who worked the morning shift, came in to drop off her coat. She saw me and hesitated. "Diana," she said. "I heard what happened." Word travels fast. She looked at the door. Then she lowered her voice. "I don't know if this matters, but the billing coordinator who was on the floor last night, Teresa? She and Carol Simmons are friends, like outside of work friends. I've seen them together at the coffee place on 5th. I looked at her. "I'm not saying anything," Simone said. I thought you should know." She left before I could respond. I stood in the locker room holding my photo of Marcus and thought about what she had said. Then I took out Thomas Greer's card. I called him from the parking lot, sitting in my car with the engine running for heat. He picked up on the second ring. "It's Diana," I said, "from last night. In the parking lot." "I know who it is," he said. "How are you doing?" I found out that the billing coordinator who was on my floor last night has a personal relationship with the woman who suspended me. "Is that something you can do? You know anyone who would be able to look into that?" A pause. "Tell me the names," I told him. He asked me a few questions, specific ones, about the timeline, the room numbers, the log procedure. He listened the way someone listens when they are actually building something from the information, not just receiving it. "Give me until this afternoon," he said. I sat in the parking lot for a moment after the call. My hands were on the steering wheel. I thought, he's a maintenance worker, Diana. What is he going to do? At 2:17 that afternoon, my cell phone rang. It was Carol Simmons. She asked me to come in. When I walked into her office this time, Carol was not alone. There were 2 people I didn't recognize, a woman in a gray blazer with a hospital legal department badge and a man in a suit who introduced himself as being from the hospital's compliance division. On Carol's desk was a printed email chain, and on Carol's face was something I had never seen before: discomfort. The billing coordinator, Teresa Yates, had been questioned that morning. A second log, a backup copy that compliance required be filed in a separate location, something Teresa apparently hadn't known existed, had been found in the internal document system. It had been accessed from a billing workstation at 9:58 the previous night. The entries were consistent with the administered doses. The original paper log had been located in a folder inside the billing station's outbox, misfiled. Whether intentionally or not was still, technically, under review. But the documentation was complete. There was no missing record. There never had been. My suspension was lifted, effective immediately. Carol said the words in a tone that suggested they cost her something to produce. She did not apologize. She said the hospital regretted any inconvenience to my employment status during the review period. The woman from legal slid a form across the desk for me to sign, acknowledging the reinstatement. I signed it. I stood up. I looked at Carol for a moment longer than was comfortable. 6 years, I said quietly. And that's what last night was. I left before she could respond. In the parking lot, I sat in my car again. My heart was pounding in a way that took a few minutes to settle. Then I called Thomas Greer. "It's resolved," I told him. "I know," he said. "Are you all right? How did you do that?" "You're a you work maintenance." Silence on the other end. Then, "Diana, I don't work maintenance. I was at the hospital last night for a board meeting. I'm on the hospital's foundation board. Thomas Greer, Greer Health Partners." I opened my mouth and closed it again. "I own a network of community health clinics," he said, "and a foundation that funds patient advocacy work. I was in that parking lot because I had stepped out to take a call, and my own car was being jump-started by facilities, which is why I was near their van." I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel. "The backup log system," I said. "You knew about it. I helped fund the compliance infrastructure upgrade 2 years ago. I knew exactly where to tell them to look." He paused. "Diana, I would like to take you to coffee if you're willing. Not to do you any more favors. I'd like to talk to you about something." We met at a diner on the east side, a quiet place with good coffee and booths with high backs. Thomas Greer was already there when I arrived, in the same dark jacket, looking exactly like what I now knew him to be, a man who didn't need to perform his own importance. He asked about Marcus first. He wanted to understand the full picture, the surgery, the therapy, the gap in coverage, the savings timeline. He asked thoughtful questions, and he did not offer solutions while I was still talking. Then he said, "I run a patient navigation program through my foundation. We place patient advocates in community settings, people who help families understand their options, connect them with resources, coordinate between insurers and providers. I've been trying to hire someone for a position in Columbus for 8 months. Every candidate has had the credentials, but not the instincts." I looked at him. "Last night," he said, "in about 4 minutes in a cold parking lot, you identified 3 potential witnesses, recognized a conflict of interest, kept your composure, and communicated clearly, despite being blindsided. Those are not things you can teach in a training program." "I'm a patient care aide," I said. "You're someone who has spent 6 years learning exactly what patients need and exactly how systems fail them. That's what I need in this role." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "It's a full-time salaried position, benefits, including, I should mention, a partnership with the Children's Audiology Program at Nationwide Children's Hospital that gives foundation employees priority referral access." I set my cup down very carefully. "I'm not offering you charity," he said. "I'm offering you a job I genuinely need filled, by someone who is genuinely right for it. What you do with the audiology partnership is your own business." I went home that afternoon and sat on the edge of my bed for a long time. I called Renee. "A man you met in a parking lot at 11 o'clock at night," she said. "I know how that sounds." "Diana." I looked him up. I said, "Greer Health Partners. He's legitimate." "Renee, the audiology partnership." She made a sound I can only describe as the noise a person makes when they are trying not to hope too hard and failing at it. I went back to Riverside Medical for 3 more weeks. I finished my shifts. I said goodbye to patients I had been caring for. I trained the aide who would take over my section. On my last day, Patricia, my charge nurse, hugged me in the hallway and told me not to forget where I came from. I told her that forgetting seemed unlikely. The foundation role started on a Monday in March. The office was small, shared with 2 other coordinators and a program manager named Beverly, who had been with Thomas for 9 years and knew every county assistance program in Central Ohio by memory. She took me to lunch on my first day and spent 2 hours explaining the landscape of what we did, who we served, where the gaps were. I was assigned to a caseload of families navigating complex diagnoses with inadequate insurance. Children, mostly. Parents sitting in waiting rooms exactly like the ones I had spent years walking past, holding folders of documents, not knowing what questions to ask. I knew what questions to ask. I knew how to read an EOB, how to escalate a prior authorization denial, how to find the social worker in a hospital who actually returned phone calls. 6 years of being the lowest-ranking person in a building full of hierarchy had taught me exactly how those buildings worked from the inside out. 3 months into the role, a woman came to our office on a Tuesday afternoon. She had a 7-year-old with a rare metabolic disorder and an insurance denial letter 6 pages long. She sat across from my desk, and I could see she had been crying in the car before she came in. I pushed a box of tissues toward her and said, "Tell me everything. We have time." She looked at me like no one had said that to her in a while. We appealed the denial. It took 11 weeks and 4 letters and 2 phone calls with the insurance company's medical director. We won. The treatment was approved. She sent me a card afterward with a drawing her daughter had made, a house with a very large sun above it, the way children draw when things feel right again. I kept it on my desk. Marcus had his surgery in September. I was in the waiting room with Renee for 4 hours and 40 minutes. When the surgeon came out and said everything had gone well, Renee cried in a way I had never seen her cry before, totally without composure, and I held her in a hospital waiting room while people walked past us and nobody said a word. 3 weeks after surgery, during a mapping session with the audiologist, they activated Marcus's implants for the first time. The audiologist said his name softly. Marcus's eyes went wide, this enormous involuntary widening of his eyes, like the world had just expanded in every direction. Renee was crying before she even registered she was crying. I was filming on my phone and my hand was shaking so much the footage was almost unusable. Almost. I've watched it more than I can count. In November, something happened that I didn't expect. Carol Simmons left Riverside Medical. I heard it through Simone, who still texted me occasionally. The official reason given was pursuing other opportunities. What Simone had pieced together from the people still inside was that the compliance review hadn't fully ended with my reinstatement. The relationship between Carol and Teresa, and a pattern of incident reports that had been quietly downgraded over 3 years involving other aides in Carol's department, had become its own investigation. I didn't know the details. I didn't ask for them. About a month after that, I got a message through the Foundation's general intake email. It came from a personal Gmail account, and the name attached to it was Carol Simmons. She wrote that she had been trying to figure out how to reach me and had finally found the Foundation's website. She wrote that she owed me an apology, a real one, not the kind she'd been trained by HR to give. She wrote that she had spent 20 years in healthcare administration, letting her need for control override her obligation to the people she was supposed to be serving, and that she understood if I didn't want to respond, but that she needed me to know she was sorry. I read it 3 times. I thought about what it must have cost her to send it. I wrote back. I told her I accepted her apology. I told her I didn't carry anger about what had happened. Not because what she'd done was small, but because carrying anger takes up space I need for other things. I told her that if she ever wanted to talk about what she was going to do next, I was a decent resource for people navigating transitions in healthcare. She wrote back, "Thank you. I don't deserve that." I wrote, "Most of us don't deserve the good things we get. That's sort of the point." In February, Thomas held a small event at the Foundation offices to mark the program's 2nd year. He invited families we'd served, partner organizations, some of the hospital staff who referred clients to us. Beverly gave a short speech. One of the fathers whose son we had helped get into a clinical trial said a few words that I will probably remember for the rest of my life. Thomas found me near the coffee table afterward. "Your mother was a hospital aide," he said. He had been talking to Beverly, who apparently knew more about my background than I realized. 22 years, I said. County hospital. She retired when I was in college, died 4 years ago. Beverly says she used to organize supply drives for uninsured patients in the 80s, before there was really any infrastructure for that kind of thing. I smiled. She did. The head of her department eventually told her it was outside her scope and she needed to stop. She didn't stop. She just got quieter about it. Thomas looked at me steadily. That sounds familiar. She used to say that if you're in a room with someone who needs something and you happen to know where to find it, then finding it is just the obvious next step. She said the complicated sounding word for that is advocacy, and the simple word for it is paying attention. He nodded. Then he said, I want to expand the program into 3 more Ohio counties next year. I'd like you to lead the expansion. I looked at him. You would be building the teams, establishing the referral networks, training new coordinators. It's a bigger role, more responsibility, better title, better pay. He shrugged. It seemed like a reasonable next step. I thought of my mother coming home tired from the county hospital, making dinner, asking me and Renee about our days with genuine curiosity. I thought of her at the kitchen table on Sunday mornings, with her reading glasses and her notepad, making lists of who needed what and who might be able to help. I had been a child watching her do this and thinking it was ordinary because she made it look ordinary. It was not ordinary. Yes, I said, I'll do it. Marcus, at his last audiology appointment, tested at age-appropriate reception levels in both ears. He is in speech therapy 3 days a week and has made more progress than his therapist initially projected. He has strong opinions about music now, which is something I could not have told you a year ago because a year ago he had not yet heard any. His current favorites are things with a strong beat, and he listens to them at a volume that I have to ask him to turn down, which is an argument I will never take for granted. He asked me last month what I do at work. I told him I help families figure out how to get what their kids need when the system makes it hard. He thought about this for a moment. Then he said, like what you did for me. I looked at him at this kid who waited patiently for 9 years, who looked at the world with that expression of someone not rushing the process. Like what a lot of people did for you, I said. That's kind of the whole point. Nobody does it alone. He nodded like this made complete sense, which, at 9 years old, perhaps it does. I keep his drawing on my desk, the one from the little girl with the metabolic disorder, the big sun over the house. Some days the work is hard, and the denials pile up, and the systems are slow, and the families are exhausted, and I am too. On those days I look at that drawing and I think about what my mother knew her whole career, that paying attention is not a small thing, that showing up, knowing the name, staying in the room, these are not small things. They are, in fact, the whole of it. A year ago, I was an aide with ice on my windshield and $4,000 in savings, and a nephew who had never heard his own name spoken out loud. I got into a stranger's van in a dark parking lot and told him everything because I was cold and tired and had nowhere else to put any of it. It turned out he was listening. It turns out that matters more than almost anything else. If this story spoke to you, I'd love for you to subscribe so you never miss one. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It genuinely means something to me to know how far these stories travel. I've got 2 more stories on screen right now. Click one and let's keep going. I'll see you there.